Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Willcocks. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behavior. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, activators, and welcome to the first ever Ask Me Anything with myself, Daniel Willcocks, which is going to be a little bonus episode to the Activated Authors podcast. And I am joined by a wonderful group of the people in the Activated Authors community, as well as our team member and wonderful helper, Sam Frost. Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Hello. Good. I want a hat now. That's the second time.
You want a hat?
Yeah, I want a hat. That is the second time you've called me a helper. And I feel like I need little pointy ears and a hat. And quite frankly, if I don't get them, then I riot.
We can figure that out. We can try and find a way to make that happen.
Cool.
But yeah, are you so how this is going to work is we have lots of people who have sent in questions beforehand. We are streaming live via Zoom to the community as well as in Facebook. So as people drop in questions into the chat, into the comments, we'll try and get to as many as we can within the hour. And it's literally as simple as that. I mean, Sam, are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
So start easy on me, because I feel like stuff like this needs to be warmed up a little bit. I need to get the vocal cords going. I need to get the mind going. I need to get like the right, well, not that there is a right answer, but I need to get the what's the first question, Sam?
Well, yeah, I was just wondering when you were going to stop. I'm sorry, did you say you've got to get your mind going? Because it's currently like what, 8:10 in the UK.
Well, yeah, I've been working since 7. That's
so
not technically true.
Did you stop your mind working and then you've like run it
Yes.
back in? Is that what's going on? Right, okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to. Okay, cool. So yes, all right. You want me to start easy on you? I can do that. Okay. Well, in that case, I've got a question for you from Caitlin Duncan, one of our wonderful expert panelists, and she wants to know, when will your productivity book get published, and are you looking for beta readers? Because in case you weren't aware, she really wants to read that book.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the full answer. The easy answer is I don't know yet. So this book has basically changed a lot of how I've been approaching writing books, because I have written and published a lot of books over the last 5-6 years. And because I have been so balls to the wall writing lots and lots of stuff, I am allowing myself a bit of grace to slow down this book. So for people who aren't aware, I think it was around April 2020 that the idea of writing a book on productivity came to me, since in 2020, I think it worked out as 26 books I wrote that year. Last year, I wrote 16 books in total. In the last sort of 6-7 years, I've written a total of 60 novels and works of different kinds, working in collaboration, short stories. And so, I have quite a lot of tricks and tips, and I've spent a lot of time studying how to best optimize a life to be, quote, productive. And I say that because one of the questions that I believe is going to pop up later will relate to this. So I had already begun work on the productivity book straight after I published Collaboration for Authors, which was around, I want to say, June 2020. And it's been a really interesting, difficult journey on that book, because it started off as, okay, here's a thing that I can write quickly to prove how easy it is to be productive. And as I was writing, I got sort of about 10-15k into the first draft at the end of 2020. And I realized, I mean, not only was I working on multiple other projects as well, but I realized that I was really doing it a disservice by rushing it, because productivity, I mean, it's very much a buzzword at the minute, but it's not an easy thing to be productive. There are many, many obstacles, like physical, mental, in your way, and it's kind of how to overcome those. So I didn't want to just be another productivity book that is time management, that is how do you get through emails, how do you balance, just the typical stuff that lots of those books tend to go on about. Because when you research productivity, when you look at productivity books, so many of them are centered around sort of more, well, they're more corporate focused for a start. It's a lot about being productive in the workplace, as opposed to how do you be productive with a creative career outside of work.
It's a lot of time management stuff, right?
Well, yeah, the actual sort of language has changed, because technically, if you think about it, productivity is time management. It's where are you best to use your time to achieve the things that you want to achieve. Where are you best to, factor your minutes to be effective? And the language has changed, as it always does. There's always a new buzzword for something or other. And so I let it sit, and I came back to it in 2021 and was like, I'll give this another stab. I got another 5,000-6,000 words into it, and then went, yeah, this still isn't right. Like I wasn't saying anything new. I wasn't saying anything sort of specific that I thought needed to be out there that sort of added anything to what was being said. Fast forward to January 2020, in which I've kind of dived in, allowed myself the room to be able to work on it. And the last few months have taken me on a journey that has made this book very, very unpredictable for me, because I've worked through all of the research. I know the structure of the book now. I know the different chapters and the stuff I want to put into it. There's still sort of bits of research to do, but realistically, I'm letting it simmer. I'm taking my time with it, because, as I say, I want to add something to the space. I don't just want to regurgitate stuff that I've heard. And what I believe I've got is a very specific, unique angle that ties together a lot of ideas but hasn't been voiced before. And I think the best thing for me as well is that I have found a way to incorporate my journey as I've gone by, because everyone has their journey that they've gone through in life over the last sort of 7-8 years. I've been flipped around sort of professionally, personally, in lots of different ways. And with each of those, I have tried to find new ways to find tactics to keep being productive, to the point that it damaged me. And so rather than what the original book was, which was, how do I be more productive? How do I cram as much as I can into my time, into what I want to do? The book actually springs off of a point in which productivity very, very badly damaged me and my psyche. And so I don't want to leave it just as that, but at the same time, I don't really want to say much more, because the book's kind of working off that premise. But all of that to kind of say, since then, I'm trying to think how much to say. Since then, I've found the voice, I found the direction, I know what it's going to be. Now it's just trying to find the best ways to put what I'm saying into practice, so that I can write the book in the best way that it's going to be. And there will be a bit more on this later on in the conversation I get more specific on, but suffice to say, it's coming. I would like it to come out, or to have it finished by the end of this year, potentially ready to publish, possibly beginning of next year. We will see at this point. And yes, Caitlin will read it.
That was the longest date I've ever heard in my life, quite frankly. So just bouncing off that a little bit, I'm going to pop to one of Julie's questions, Julie Heiner. And she said, how do you basically manage your time when you want to do it all, and you want to do it all now? And also, good question, Julie. That's also from me asking for a friend, because I have the exact same issue. There's all the things I want to do. I want to do them all now. If I pick just one, then none of the other ones are getting done, but I want to do those just as bad as this one. So then I sit in this middle of the circle of things I want to do and just go, ugh.
Yeah, I like the resounding nods as well from the group. It's I think it's the age-old problem. It's paralysis by analysis. It's when we live in a world in which we have so many options, so many choices, what is the right choice to make? Because if we make that choice, we're discounting thousands of other choices, and that feels like we're losing and leaving stuff behind. It's interesting, because I've very much been quite on this journey over the last few weeks, and one thing that I've heard again recently that it always bounces back is, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so I very often find in my journey, as I'm sure all you guys have seen through the group as we run it, but also through Next Level Authors as well, that I tend to go through real accordion phases in which I will heap my schedule to the max, then I'll strip stuff down, and then a few weeks later I'll build it back up, and then I'll strip it down. And one concept that I've come across recently that's definitely been mulling over in my head, number one, is the idea of seasonality. It's the principle that there can be periods in which you are incredibly busy, but then you have to bake into that period to allow yourself some very, very specific downtime. You can't burn at 100 forever, because you die basically. So when it comes to wanting to do all the things, the answer really comes in, what are your priorities? So it's age old, and I'm sure that Renee's going to drink, but what is your why? What is it that you want to achieve, and why is it you want to achieve that thing? Because if your goal is to make money and you are doing lots of volunteering work and doing things that aren't in any way ever going to bring you income, then that's a massive mismatch on what you're doing. And when I say goal, I don't just mean sort of what is the thing you'd kind of like. I mean, what is the core fundamental thing that you want to see from yourself for the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years? And how do you aim towards that? Having a goal and having that North Star really makes it easier to strip away all the crap that doesn't move towards what you want to do. Because don't get me wrong, you can like have your hobbies, you can have your things that still give you energy, give you passion outside of the main thing you want to do. But when it comes to work, when it comes to focus, you have to strip it back, and you have to be certain that the thing that you're doing is in some way, even if it's not going to bear fruits right now, even if it's experimental, that the chance is there that it's going to take you forward, it's going to take you to where you want to be. In a much more practical sense, what I tend to do is I literally just do massive word clouds on my whiteboard, and I will just list everything I'm doing. So I'll kind of categorize it through activated authors, Devil's Rock Publishing, sort of ghostwriting, the other stuff that I do. I shoot off there every single little thing that I'm doing, every single bubble, even down to, with this community, we have the expert panels, we have the Ask Me Anythings, we have all these extra things that we do. With Devil's Rock, I have actually managing my books, just writing the new books, all the different things, and just get as granular as I can. And then start to see what you can peel back that isn't adding to anything. It's certainly a journey that I continue to go through on the daily, because I did get myself into a position about a year and a half ago where I just took on too much, and I essentially got involved in 3 different businesses. So even now I'm still trying to simmer that down and streamline and focus, because that harsh reality of you can do anything but you can't do everything really, really did hit me. And if you're trying to do everything at once, you end up just flailing in the water. But if you can focus on one arm at a time, you actually start to, churn your way forward and make it happen. Was there more? Remind me, am I missing a part of answering that question?
No, I mean, you basically answered all of it. It was what do you want to do when you want to do everything, and you want to do everything now, but you want to stay productive.
Yeah.
And actually manage to do those things.
Yeah, just start by picking one thing. And if you are at a point in which you have dozens and dozens of different things, as I have been, I am at this point. I actually had a talk with a potential coach for myself today, and we got into a chat about all the different things I'm doing and sort of trying to streamline and bring them all together. And I think it's worth adding as well that when you first start, you say yes to everything, or you can say yes to everything, because you don't know what's going to stick, and you don't know, especially like, and I'm talking here about, for example, when I went full time, you say yes to every opportunity because you don't know where it's going to lead. And I think there's always that element of you need to put yourself out there to try and to see what works. And it's only in actually trying a thing and then giving it the chance to resonate with you, or to just be friction, that you then can cut out definitely the things that you do and don't want to do. And it's a constant journey of taking on new stuff, slimming down, recycling, moving forward, and going on like that. Or at least, it has been, as much as I found it.
Well, I mean, and as River very astutely mentioned in the comments, like, as well as spending time with your child and also downtime, it really is a juggling act.
Well, another concept that
don't drop the baby.
Another concept that I've come across a few times is paying yourself first. So we're very, very eager to go onto our digital calendar apps and put down, this is writing time, this is work time, all this kind of stuff, but we never schedule, this is rest time, this is recovery time, this is time with partner, this is time with child, like all that kind of stuff. And because we don't, it then just slips through the cracks, and it sometimes, I think, mentally can seem less important. And I know that personally, I'm one of those people, I don't like the idea of blocking in fun time, because it feels like it's like organizing fun time. But there's a way you can do it in which you leave that open. Don't get so granular that it's like at 11:30, I'm going to play blocks with Tiger, and then who calls their kids Tiger? Someone did. Enjoy that. But you know what I mean? Like, just make sure that there is times, not even just to say, this is my downtime, but just to say, do not schedule work for this.
Yeah.
And create those boundaries. And again, that's something that I'll be fully transparent here, I'm not great at, and it's something that I'm definitely working at to try and get better. But it's worth paying yourself first.
Yeah, I like that. River was saying that her Wednesdays are her daughter days, which is just, I think that's beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to change tact a little bit, because I'm pretty sure that you could just get sucked into talking about productivity all night, and well, Probably most people
No.
would be happy with that, but like I've heard about it enough. Joking. So Ara asks, how easy is it to start as an indie with no mailing list? And I think that's quite an interesting question. There's been a lot of discourse around mailing lists recently. So what do you say to that then?
So I mean, I have two answers technically. Number one, in terms of the technical side of doing it, it's never been easier. You find your mailing provider, you set it all up, you follow all the different guidances that they have on the servers to set up your mailing list and to make all the program work. But I think it's probably a bit more down to, or the question is more centered around actually trying to get people on the mailing list and putting out content that people are going to enjoy. And again, like the answer at its core is it's easy, but that depends on where you're at mentally and how you think about yourself and your business. Like, I think actually putting the mailing list out there and building the audience, the actual mechanics of it are quite simple if you want to just build it slowly. Obviously, if you're trying to like get thousands of people very quickly, that's a bit of a different game. But the point of a mailing list is obviously to create a connection, to create a rapport, to create some emotional resonance with your reader through the digital chasm, because ultimately you don't know that person personally, they don't really know you personally, they're joined by the fact that they like a little bit of what it is that you do. When you don't have any books out, you can still build a mailing list, you can still make a connection. The number one thing to start with is some form of reader magnet, and that can look like anything. I know I've had quite a few discussions with people about reader magnets and stuff recently, and I think there's a general misunderstanding is the wrong word, but I've heard a lot of people say your reader magnet must be between 5,000 and 15,000 words. And the truth is, your reader magnet can be whatever the fuck you want it to be. It doesn't matter. What your reader magnet needs to be is something enticing enough to make a reader go, I would like to receive this thing and to get to know more about the author. So when I first started, I was writing lots of short stories for the Other Stories podcast. And so I would just recycle those short stories and say, if you want a free short story, join my mailing list. And those short stories were like 1,000 words at the time. I've seen authors give away entire box sets as a reader magnet. I've seen them give away novels. Like it depends what it is you have working for you. I know that you have a lot of works that are sort of lying around doing different things. So it's, you have a lot of stuff to work with depending on the type of audience you want to build. Which would kind of be my biggest advice, especially getting started on a mailer list, is try your best to be focused and know the type of reader that you're trying to reach. That's the key thing, because there's no point putting all the effort into just drawing in anybody from all different genres just for the sake of having numbers on your list. Having an effective mailing list means having a list with a high open rate and people that actually engage with your content, because there's no point having 5,000 people on the list if one of them buys your book. So I would say the best place to start is find a piece of writing of yours that you have, short, long, whatever you want to do, put it onto a PDF, find a way to ship it onto a program like BookFunnel, which makes it easier for readers to download that piece of writing, because BookFunnel doesn't have length restrictions. And then just set up the mailing list. Use the reader magnet to obviously get people on there. But then in terms of content, and this is where a lot of people struggle because of imposter syndrome, because, what do I have to say that a reader
wants to hear from me?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a common concern to have. And I hear it multiple times across like just lots and lots of different platforms. So you're not alone in thinking that. The truth is, if someone has liked what you've written, there's an air of almost gravitas, of appreciation of you having done something that they believe that they can't do. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But if you think of all the writers that you appreciate, all the people that you love, if you think of maybe, I don't know, one of your favorite authors, and think of what it would be like to receive just a word from them, whether it's what their wife's been up to that day, their husband, like what their pet's doing, anything like that. There is something about being part of that behind the scenes and almost being privy to secrets. And so a really great place to start, if you've got them, pets tend to do very, very well in newsletters. I'll shout out Faye Trask's newsletter with her pup date. I just love that name, in which she post pictures about her dog, and as well as the books and things. You can still share other people's books and curate the content based around the type of books that you want to write. So if you're writing sci-fi, you can share other people's sci-fi books and just be a sci-fi fan and bring people into that club and just show them that you're a human that they would enjoy spending time with. Like I've shared everything, sort of like minor anecdotes about Bailey, food that I've cooked, just little bits that are going on in the week, places that I've been. Joanna Penn does a lot of sort of pictures of places that she's been, and all that kind of stuff. So there is so much content. I think the real resistance comes in that imposter syndrome, in that, what do I have to say? And that's a hurdle that you kind of have to start getting over, because the truth is that 99% of people want to write a book and only 1% really ever write them. That's not an exact statistic. I'm being hyperbolic, but the premise is generally true. So you're already in the camp of people that is doing something that so many people admire and so many people want to do. So just having that, try and remember that you are steps ahead and there is some value in your voice, and you do have something to say, because people will listen. And the only way to start that and put that into action is, well, making it happen and just proving it over time by bringing people into what you do.
Just quickly before we move on to another question, you said there about and then you just set it up. Now, I know obviously most of the question is around kind of like you were talking about imposter syndrome, like what does my reader magnet look like, or I don't like just magnet of any description, because some people want people on the mailing list for things other than books, or just books. But so you say just set it up. What are the kind of like programs that you not necessarily recommend, but have had experience with, for where someone could actually go and just set it up? Because obviously a lot of people, if they've not set one up before, might not know what that step looks like.
Yeah. So I personally use MailerLite, mostly because I really like the functionality of their design for how you can actually set up the newsletters. There's a lot of cool features in there. So if you send a newsletter, you can actually put in like countdowns. You can put in sort of e-commerce blocks. You can put in videos that have sort of like GIFs that play and stuff. It's very animated. I used to use MailChimp and I moved over to MailerLite. I haven't used MailChimp in long enough now that I don't know what their behind the scenes setup looks like, but that is one of the bigger ones people can use. Things like Aweber is another big one, because the other thing too, and this gets a bit more in the weeds, and I won't kind of linger here, but one thing that is worth considering is if you are looking at building a bigger business and looking very, very specifically at integrating your mailing list with lots of different services, certain mailing lists are more compatible for that. So Aweber, for example, is very good at integrating with lots of different like WordPress and different behind the scenes things if you're going to make like a bigger scale business. Whereas if you're just looking to start a mailing list and to get people on board, then things like MailerLite and MailChimp are just a great place to start.
Cool, perfect. And I would just like to add very quickly, because we were literally talking about this earlier about like mailing lists and stuff, and I had what can only be described as a conniption, and down once I'd calmed down and stopped like having my head between my legs and deep breathing, suggested that maybe I don't have to look at all of it all at once and just kind of look at the very next step, because it is overwhelming. I speak from quite literally where I am right now in like my journey, experience, whatever. It's terrifying, and there's so many different options. Yeah,
and it's like anything, like it is finding the right step at the right time, like you say. And if you're just starting out in your writing career and you've got just enough to make a reader magnet, you just want to get started, just do a monthly newsletter. It's a small commitment, it gets you started, and it starts to build that consistent habit. And again, as we were talking about earlier, Sam, you can change and experiment. That's the beauty of what we do. We can see what works, we can practice, we can try new things. Like I've run mailing lists monthly, I've done them fortnightly, I've done weekly, I've switched them around, I've changed the content, I've changed the format, I've changed the design. As you go, you just get better. And it's one of those things where you do just have to start if that's the direction you want to head. And yeah, just understand that you can at any point change. If it's too much for you, or if it's not kind of working as you want it to, just tweak it. That's what it's there for.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So Eden has asked, who has had the greatest influence on your craft?
I also love that Eden's face suggests that they completely forgot what the question was. It's like, did I say that?
What did Eden ask?
I think it's hard to narrow it down to one very, very specific person. I mean, the obvious one goes, Stephen King. Without Stephen King, I wouldn't have kind of, I wouldn't have made my way into horror. I got obsessed with his writing a fair few years ago and just kind of got swept away down the Stephen King train. So, and also when I first got into, are you right, Sam?
Yeah, sorry, the pug's just snoring really loudly and it killed me.
Yeah, like one of the reasons I actually got into writing in the first place was very, very specifically Stephen King, because I was Secret Santa'd a Stephen King book of short stories. And, that I've said this story on many different platforms, but that was kind of my inception into appreciating how beautiful short stories can be, and also thinking that I could give it a go. So Stephen King definitely gets credit. People like Richard Lehman, I'm a big fan of his work, even though arguably it's quite outdated at this point. There's a horror writer sort of around the 70s, 80s time, but his books are very
strong female characters, I imagine.
Yeah.
Strong, diverse, nuanced. Yeah.
It's very specific.
No brain fever.
No
Captain the Vapors.
As you'd kind of expect. But the actual writing style, it's a very, very easy read. It doesn't get too bogged down in detail. It's very plot driven. And for horror readers, it's kind of like classic vintage horror experience. And I'd never read any of his books before, and then I was recommended by my buddy Luke, and I've now pretty much got, every time I go to a charity shop, I just see if I can find another one. I've got dozens of his stuff. So he was a big influence. Nick Cutter, who wrote The Troop, The Deep, Little Heaven. His writing is very fantastical, as well as it plays so much on the senses that you can literally like taste and smell what is happening. And, that opens up a lot of doors to really enriching your fiction and making worlds believable. I mean, just a whole host of people. There's Chuck Palahniuk, there's Brian Keane, Adam Neville. I'm a big fan of his. Just a lot of male-centric horror authors, it seems, but that they have very, very heavily inspired the type of works that I like to write. Clive Barker. Yeah, I'm not giving you one person, Ethan. I'll give you a whole army.
Sorry, I just muted myself because someone has had the audacity to have their online groceries shopping delivered, and my dog is having none of it.
Oh, so disgusting! I just mute
myself. I know. Okay, so I saw that Rivers asked about this, and I was literally, it was my next question that I was going to. So Pan asked, talking about your influences, craft or genre, would you include creative means other than books? So TV, movies, nonfiction, music, video games, I don't know, museums, crows in the sky. And River was asking what your favourite horror film was. So I thought maybe you could just parcel that up in a nice little bow while I seamlessly let my dog out so he will shut the F up.
Yeah, I mean, it's cliche, but you can draw your influence from absolutely anywhere. So I would say I'm not actually huge on horror movies. Like, I've watched a fair few in my time, but my passion seems to be more with horror books and horror prose. But in terms of favorite horror movie, I think probably the Saw franchise is up there. Yeah, I think this is the part as well where you start blanking on horror films.
On any film ever made, ever.
On any film ever made, or any story. Now, I think Saw was definitely sort of the first dive I had into horror. And I did quite like those, which is strange because I'm also not very like a splattergore type person. It was just, the time that it was kind of, I think that was really my entry into horror movies. So I'll stick with Saw, but yeah, like inspiration from lots of different places. I do watch a fair chunk of Netflix and different series. Midnight Mass was freaking fantastic. River agrees. Like beyond good. Although I will argue I was quite disappointed with the final episode. That's a story for another time. Quite disappointed. Yeah. Quite.
Listen to you monologue for about an hour. Quite disappointed.
But yeah, just also just reading from other genres as well. Like I read mostly horror and I write mostly horror, but I do read sort of thriller books, fantasy books, sort of biographies, and just sort of true stories of different things. And I mean, TV wise, I'm mostly Netflix. I play like a fair chunk of video games, and quite like, that's the fantastic thing about video games these days. The stories in them are absolutely amazing. The last episode of Midnight Mass was the only episode I liked. Oh no.
You and Pan, I will say this, seem to have the most opposite taste in things. Whenever Pan hates something, you love it. Whenever you love something, Pan's like, really?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
But yeah, video games, like I feel it's kind of amazing that we live in an age where video game storylines are phenomenal. So playing sort of the Uncharted series, playing The Last of Us, games like that, where they really have sort of, it's not just gameplay, it's a fundamental heart of the story that is just incredible storytelling.
They've got gears on storytelling.
Yeah, they really have. It's a full experience. And
like, was it
I'm
Heavy
here for
Rain?
it.
Heavy Rain was the first. Oh my God. Yeah.
Heavy Rain was phenomenal. And with like 20 alternate endings as well.
Yeah, I finished it with the best one.
Of course. Yeah. But yeah, it's, inspiration from absolutely all over the place. I feel like I'm missing a part of that question.
I think it's not just about your influence, but I think he was asking particularly like if you find that valid, because obviously there's so many people that's like, if you want to write, you have to read, which is fair, which is good advice. Like, I'm not going against that, but it seems to kind of like end there. So I think it's just a case of, is it valid to be influenced by things other than other words people have also written?
Yeah. So, I mean, story is story at the end of the day, whether it's a soap, whether it's just a small article in a paper, like we draw our influence from everywhere. But I think very, very importantly is we live in a world in which multimedia is not only sort of here, but is very, very accelerated by the different platforms. Like the fact that we now have so many independent publishing platforms, not just in writing, but in games, in films, like anyone can grab whatever medium they want to and just create a story and put it out into the world. And so you can't ignore all the different influences and possibilities for what your story could be. Like for people unfamiliar with Johnny B. Truant, because I've been listening to a lot of him today, and I used to be a big follower of his in the days that he ran the self-publishing podcast. And he released a book called Fat Vampire in 2012, which, number one, is just an amazing concept anyway. But I found out today that that book has been picked up and is currently being produced into a TV series with Sci-Fi. And it was the second book he ever wrote. It was one that, he advertised and he pushed out, but, it's just kind of like sat and done occasional cycles here and there. It's now being turned into like a full TV show. So, cross-medium capabilities are incredible. Like the other stories a couple of times has been optioned for potential TV series deals that have never kind of come to fruition because, that's the game of what it is. But, you look at Love, Death and Robots, which is sort of a very, it's not episodic, it's anthologized sort of sci-fi / horror show on Netflix. Archive 81 is a podcast that's also been turned into a Netflix show. Like there are so many opportunities to cross-pollinate your work into different genres, adaptations. I'm friends with authors who have turned books into board games that they funded on Kickstarter, comic books. Like for me, the medium really doesn't matter. The story matters. And if the story can transcend across all of those things, then that's an amazing way to go.
Yeah.
I've not actually yet watched Archive 81 though. It's on my list to watch.
River strongly recommends you watch.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to bounce back to Julie.
Hi, Julie.
And Julie asked, do you have a top 3 tips for marketing yourself as an author? And she's specifically looking for ideas of how to get your unique flair out there and be memorable, which I think is a very good question, particularly for Julie.
Yeah.
Or for everyone, but like Julie has a very like unique and awesome flavor.
Yeah. So I mean, to start with, I'd say that you're already there, Julie. Like it's when you go to your stuff, when you look at your website, killersanddemons.com, for people who haven't checked it out, it's
at Killers and Demons on Instagram also.
It's very, very clear what you're trying to do. It is that 80s metal, serial, horror, like all that kind of good stuff. So it's hard to give you advice because you have such a strong brand and identity. I think.
But try, Dan. That's literally the point of this.
I will work on it. But so, I mean, the top things that are kind of universal, but it's always worth bearing in mind is number one, just try to be as consistent as possible. And that doesn't mean that your brand can't adapt and evolve, but if you're bringing in certain type of people, make sure you're feeding those people the thing that they came to you for, whatever that looks like. And it doesn't mean you should be scared of experimenting and trying new things, but what you've got to remember is that if you've done your job right, and if you've brought people into your world and the things that you do, and in your newsletter you're sharing the things that you're passionate about and that you want your audience to kind of understand and get, then half of the hard work is done for you. Because as long as you're being honest and sharing the things that are you, like I'll take a minute just to kind of talk about like this community, for example. It's sprung from a lot of I know, I definitely, for people listening, if this is your first podcast episode, I don't want to go into the full history. It's quite long.
So long.
But over the last year and a half, 2 years, especially the nonfiction side, I found that the more honest, the more transparent I've been about my journey, the hardships, the highs, the lows, like all the kind of dirty corners that people don't tend to talk about, the more honest I've been about that, the easier it's been to find the right people to come into the community who seem to be benefiting from some of the stuff that I've done. Because I saw that there were so many people out there who were presenting this very polished veneer on what author life is. Like, I wrote a couple of books. I now get up at like 9. I write until 2, have a drink on the balcony, and then I'm done for the day. And that's it. Like a bit of marketing. I put out a newsletter every now and then. It takes me 5 minutes to put a newsletter, all that kind of stuff.
And their corners are pristine.
Exactly. And their corners are absolutely squeaky clean. And so in embracing who I am in a way that I definitely didn't when I started off as an author. And for people that are interested, go back to my early episodes of the Story Studio with Luke Condor, because I was definitely trying to come across as someone who was an expert before I was an expert. And I was saying the things I felt like I believed in, but the more the things I should be saying, and all the stuff that was hard about what I was doing. The fact that, when I started writing, I had a newborn child, the fact that I was working my job and I was my partner's maternity cover. The fact that, I went from running my own business when little one was a wee one into working in a full-time job to having to like make those changes, squeezing in time, like running the podcast alongside of doing my own fiction, like all of these things that at the time I was almost like embarrassed by or ashamed by, because they felt like they shouldn't be part of the narrative for what it is to be a creative and to push and make that stuff happen. And, again, now, like, it's a nice position to be where I am at the minute, because I can kind of look back in hindsight and go, here are the mistakes I've made. But that really is what I want to liberate from other authors. So spinning this back to, finding your own voice, just being authentically you. And it's sometimes easier said than done, because not everyone is fully comfortable with embracing who they authentically are for different reasons. But I will say, Julie, that you do come across genuine, you come across authentic. That's one of the reasons that I definitely gravitated to you in the beginning when, you were doing the readings and we started working together on different books and stuff. So in terms of voice, just keep doing what it is that you're doing. I will say as well, it's worth trying to do less better. So what I mean by that is, don't get sucked into splattergunning yourself across all the platforms just because you feel like you should be on them. As we kind of said earlier, start with one thing that you like, get good at it. So for me, that was Instagram. I really, really enjoy Instagram. I get on with it well, like it's a platform I like. So I cut out Twitter. I don't use Facebook as much as I used to. I've only recently started playing with TikTok. And that's more, not because I think I'm going to gravitate over there entirely, but number one, just to see what it's about, because I like to play and experiment and be up to date as much as I can with stuff.
He's down with the kids. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. I just need to like do those little videos where you point at words over here and then over here and just have some funky song in the background.
Desperately holding on to that 30.
But yeah, so do less better. And as I say, just give people your truth. But I also understand, because I'm very critical of this, give people your truth, but give people the truth that you're comfortable in sharing. Because just because I say be honest and transparent, that doesn't mean, for example, that I'm going to go into history of like ex-partners or certain people that, my business has nothing to do with, because I can speak broadly about stuff, but I'm not gonna like use my platform to like air dirty laundry or to use other people's examples just, you know, without their permission. So be honest. And you know, you can curate certain parts of your life to share with people. It's totally up to you where you go with that.
Well, I was going to ask about this because I know, for example, one of our members, Emmy G, you know, and other kind of authors and things will use pen names.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously sometimes pen names are because you write in multiple genres and you don't want to confuse or cross-pollinate readers. But of course, another reason, and because I saw River's comment, is people might be deathly afraid of rejection, or that like they're not interesting enough, even if they are being completely transparent to the level of which they are comfortable. So while you're saying it's important to be kind of genuine, transparent, all of those kind of things, what do you say about if someone wants to almost make a character, so they've got a protection level? Like how do you work that instead of kind of the just like this is actually me? What if someone wants to be like, this is Joanne?
Yeah,
I am Joanne.
So what I will say on that is I definitely understand there are certainly situations in which people are in positions where it's better to have a pen name and to create a mask of safety in front of, you know, what they're doing. By all means, do that. I think fundamentally there are still going to be core principles and values that translate into that character. And if anything, like if you are super nervous about putting your name out there, having that freedom of being behind a name is liberating. It's fantastic. It's, you know, an amazing way to go. And you know,
potentially your drag persona.
Yeah, and you can potentially do things with that name that you couldn't by yourself. What I will say is that, and this is very much speaking from not only my experience, but lots of authors that I've spoken to, because I had a real worry about this when I started with, I considered using a pen name, Stephen Hancock, for people that are interested. And the...
I'm sorry, pause just for a second, because I'm sorry, you wanted a pen name, but you were like, do you know, the one part of my name that I can't drop is cock.
Do you know what? It's true. It's my nan's maiden name. So I have a whole history of Willcocks in my family.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry to interrupt, but
yeah, no, that's fine. One thing that I know that a lot of people do worry about, especially when you put out that first book, because, you know, I write horror, I write weird stuff, is what if the people who some of these characters are based off, what if my family reads this, and what if they sort of judge me for the things that I put out there? Thanks for that, Julie. And I think there's a very visceral reaction that people have with putting out that first book and worrying that they're going to be seen for certain things that they put in there. Because I know that my first books, I definitely included situations that were quite close to me personally in some ways. And the thing I'll say on that is that the people that you're worried about reading your book are likely not going to read your book. Like, I'm worried that my parents would read and judge me for sort of like stuff that I put in horror wise and, you know, gratuitous violence wise, and they haven't picked it up. Like my friends and family, most of them, like the response I typically get is, oh, I should really read one of your books at some point. And I literally say, why? Like, I'm not asking you to. If it's not something that interests you, don't read it. Like, what? It's just a waste of time. I'm not expecting you to read it. So if that is a worry of yours, I wouldn't put too much weight into that. Like, obviously I don't know sort of the people that you're around and everything else, but it's not something to worry about too much. But yeah, I think, you know, it can be very liberating to have that pen name and can be useful. Obviously it then opens you up to never being able to fully be transparent, and, you know, you kind of have to take that as it comes. So I very much just decided that I'd rather be Daniel Willcocks and just, you know, if I'm writing anything, I want to be wholeheartedly behind what I'm writing. And again, that's not a slight on people that have pen names. That's just the choice that I made.
Yeah. Just, yeah, don't drop the cock. That makes perfect sense. That, Julie, I want that on my tombstone. Okay. I'm going to do, because we're getting close to night, so I will, 2 more questions. So first of all, from Pan would like to know, when would you say it's best, if ever, to publish under a limited liability company? And did you go at it from the very beginning with an LLC?
So I will start by saying I'm not a legal advisor, and this is just my experience. My business, I began as a sole trader, which I think is slightly different in other countries. But I went as sole trader just because it was easier to manage. For me, as an author, your business doesn't really rely on too many other people in terms of, bringing on a team, being responsible for the health and well-being of others. If you're running events, it's very solo, it's very siloed, it's very easy just to go, I'm writing a book and I'm putting it out into the ether. So legally, there isn't a whole great deal that can come back at you if you, not including like libel and fraud and that kind of stuff. So I started as sole trader. It was only when I started Devil's Rock Publishing that I switched to a limited company, because my plan was to expand and to bring on other team members. And, if you're looking at expanding and building kind of like quite a big business is what you're doing, it can be, and I stress can be, advisable, according to my accountant, to convert to a limited company, because the main advantage being that, if there are any legal battles, if anything goes wrong, the person who's coming after you, they can take they come for the company as opposed to your personal assets. So, my house, for example, isn't tied up in my business. Whereas if I'm a sole trader, I am the business. So anything that I own personally as a personal asset can also be used in those situations. So, it's on an individualized basis, how big you think you're going to be, what your kind of business plan is, the different risks that you think you're going to have to take. There are tax advantages to either way that you go, depending on how you have your business set up. But yeah, it was sort of on advice from my accountant as I started Devil's Rock with the intention of growing, bringing on more of a team. Activated Authors is the brand name for all of this stuff, but it does trade under the Devil's Rock Publishing brand. So as this scales, as I want it to, and as this grows, there'll be positions where that's a benefit to be a limited company. But I think it's got to be on an individual basis. I'd recommend speaking to an accountant or a lawyer just to work out what's best for you, depending on the kind of content you're putting out, how you want to grow your business, how you build the infrastructure. But I would say that sort of sole trader is like a fine place to start.
Lovely. Sole trader. So, because I'm a sole trader, is that the same as like freelance? Would that be a good like reference to other places? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
I literally don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah, I won't dive too deep because I'm not massively, I'm clued up as much as I need to be for my business. But yeah, most freelancers are sole traders in the UK.
Fair enough. Right, and the final question for this evening, because we've got 5 minutes left. I figured we started with productivity, so we might as well end productivity sandwich.
I'm num
with just too many stories about the fact that you clearly are over-invested in the word cock in your name. Renee would like to know, has the book is it 4,000 weeks?
Yes.
I read that as 40,000, and now 4,000 seems like so few weeks. Anyway, that's by the by. Has the book 4,000 weeks changed your view on productivity at all?
So if you had asked me a few months ago, yes, but not quite. It's been very timely that book has come out. So and this is kind of the stuff I was alluding to at the beginning. So I'm halfway through the book, so I've not yet finished it, but the stuff that I've read so far it does resonate very, very deeply, because something that I've been coming across quite a lot, and what is also informing my productivity book, is this concept of anti-productivity. So for people who are familiar with Cal Newport and books like Deep Work, he has a podcast which is fantastic, but I came across the idea of what he calls slow productivity, and there is a real anti-productivity movement, and that's not that people want to be doing less or to achieving less. The anti-productivity movement is more about how do you effectively work on the important stuff in a way that doesn't burn you out and that you can sustain. Because as if you crack down what the history of productivity is broadly a term that came around with farming industrialization, in which people were looking at the best way to maximize the output of industry by sort of reducing the input of cost and time. So productivity itself, its roots come from the Industrial Revolution and really sort of like bad working conditions. And it carries on as people go forward, and as technology has evolved and enabled us to do more and more, it therefore means that we feel like we can do more and more and more, to the point that we are, as a society, in a position in which we have normalized what is very, very radical work patterns, outputs, productivity. And so 4,000 weeks kind of plays on this idea as well, that, you know, we do only have a limited time, and there's very much a culture of hustle, of work until you drop, of cramming work into every last second that you have. And I'm really trying not to get too deep, but I feel like I am on this. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place to work harder when you need to. Like, I clearly needed that time to hustle and to work hard to get myself from a position of being in the old day job to where I am now. Like, I couldn't have done that if I hadn't worked my ass off, unless I found sort of very, very different means. But the broad conversation tends to be like, how do you just spend more time working? How do you like cut everything else out so you can spend more time, I mean, working on things that you want to in the productive way? But it's a killer, and it's not what humans are built to maintain. And I speak from, as I say, a position of an incident in which I had sort of very, very bad like psychological moment. Again, that will I'll tease that comes out in the book. But also just in terms of the amount of burnouts that I regularly went through and continue to still go through as I'm trying to peel back on what I have taught myself and bought into with productivity. And so the book itself, I think, is just it's another confirmer of how hard it is, just anyhow, as I said earlier, being convicted in making that one decision and cutting out all else, and accepting that productivity doesn't mean you are going to be able to achieve everything. By reading these books, by managing your inbox and getting your inbox to zero, by, you know, getting up at 4 a.m. every morning, you're still not going to be able to achieve the things that the world is telling you that you can like always achieve. So it's just another arrow in that quiver, really, of anti-productivity. And again, like, I think anti-productivity will have negative connotations, but what I'm very interested in is how do you sustainably engage in work that matters, that can move you forward in a way that is most effective, which I think ultimately is what productivity should be, rather than how can I fill every last second with stuff.
And then also have a side hustle.
And then also have your kids, and then also have the day job, and then also be looking after an elderly relative, and then also have something else going on.
Oh, God bless Janine. Elderly relative.
Oh, okay. Who is Janine?
An elderly relative, not mine. But I assume someone's got one called Janine.
She all right? Still going bingo?
Yeah. She has to be wheeled there now, but you know. Yeah.
It is a good book, though. I would recommend it to people.
Well, I think, look at that. I've run us 1 minute over. I do apologise. There are a few other questions in here that I will roll over to the next AMAs, or if you, sorry, every time I say it, I just hear the American Music Awards. The next Ask Me Anything, or Ask Dan Anything, because, you know, that's why you're here. Or maybe if Mr. Willcocks, desperately try not to make a joke, might pop in the Slack and answer a few. I don't know.
We'll see.
But there we go. That's what I've got for you this evening.
There it is. Well, thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you for Yanni and Cassie and everyone else who joined us over on Facebook. And we will be doing another one of these next month, so feel free to get involved and jump on over then. But thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Activate your energy.